Compelling disappearances seem to come in two main flavors. There are those where the circumstances of the disappearance are so strange and seemingly impossible that alone is compelling. And then there are those where the explanation is more sinister, and that is what makes them compelling. These are the disappearances where the person or people were clearly taken against their will. In this video from Deep Seek, we are going to cover a case that blurs the line between tragedy and nightmare, where a mother's instinct refused to accept what everyone else believed was true. And as always, viewer discretion is advised. In January of 2003, Luz Cuevas arrived at her sister's house where a child's birthday festivities were already underway. As kids ran around and played, Luz said her hellos to friends and family and did her best to settle into the party atmosphere. Almost immediately though, something felt off. Luz locked eyes with a little girl of about 6 years old across the room and was hit with an overwhelming sense of familiarity. The girl's brown hair and dark brown eyes reminded Luz of her children when they were that age, and she couldn't help but think about the child she lost back in 1997. Luz gave birth to a baby girl named Delimar that year, and just 10 days later, the infant was tragically killed during a house fire that was reportedly started as a result of bad wiring. Sadness washed over Luz as she continued to stare at the little girl across the room who was about the same age as Delimar would have been. Before the moment passed, the little girl flashed Luz a wide smile, showing off her deep dimples. This was the moment that Luz knew with every fiber of her being that the little girl she was staring at was the exact same little girl that had been claimed by the house fire years earlier. She didn't know how long she stood there watching the girl. It was like time stopped. It may have only been a few seconds, but for her part, the little girl seemed to notice Luz, too. She moved in close to her on her own and lingered nearby, even though the two had seemingly never met before. There was no conversation, but the interaction stuck with them long after the moment had passed. The girl appeared comfortable around Luz, as if she recognized her without knowing why. As the party continued, the children eventually went upstairs to color and play. At this moment, Luz saw an opportunity and followed a short distance behind them, trying to stay calm. She knew how unbelievable her thoughts would sound if anyone asked what she was doing, so she did her best to appear natural. For years to that point, she had been told that Delimar died in the fire. Investigators and medical officials had assured her that there was no doubt, but even still, Luz had never really accepted that explanation. When the children started leaving the room they were coloring in, Luz acted. She stopped the girl as she was passing by and told her that there was gum stuck in her hair. The little girl then stood while Luz carefully pulled out a few strands of her hair and put them in a napkin before anyone noticed what she was doing. The moment was brief and Luz returned downstairs knowing she might be wrong, but also knowing she couldn't ignore what she felt. Taking the girl's hair was the only thing she could think of to find out the truth. And for the first time since the night of the fire, she felt like she finally might have something concrete to bring to the police. Obviously, it was all very risky. And to understand why Luz was willing to take such a risk, it's important to go back to December of 1997 when everything started. Delimar Vera was born on December 5, 1997 in Philadelphia as the daughter of Luz and Pedro Vera. Her arrival came with the usual exhaustion and adjustment that follows the birth of a newborn. And after a few days in the hospital, Luz brought Delimar home to the family's row house in the Feltonville section of the city. And things only got more lively as those early days of Delimar's life wore on. Her friends and extended family came over regularly, and one of those visitors was Carolyn, a family acquaintance connected to Luz through marriage. Carolyn stopped by on December 15th to meet Delimar and drop off a gift for her parents. During her visit with the couple, Carolyn actually dropped the news that she was expecting, too. This was met with the usual excitement and offerings of congratulations, but the joy was short-lived. As Luz and Carolyn talked downstairs, a fire broke out on the second floor where Delimar was fast asleep. Upon realizing this, Luz rushed up the stairs to Delimar's bedroom. And when she reached it, she noticed that the door was closed and the window was open. As she lunged for Delimar's crib, Luz was horrified to see that the infant wasn't there. The crib was completely empty. Luz then desperately searched for the baby as the flames and smoke grew around her. She suffered burns to her face and hands in the effort, but no matter where she looked, she couldn't find Delimar. Conditions got so bad that Luz had to leave the building before her own life was put in jeopardy. Emergency crews responded right away to the call for help and worked to extinguish the fire. As firefighters worked to put out the blaze, members of the local media started showing up, and news footage from that night would show Carolyn comforting Luz outside the home as the scene unfolded. When the fire was finally extinguished and an investigation could begin, fire experts determined that the blaze had been caused by faulty wiring. And just as Luz learned, investigators found that there was no sign of Delimar in the bedroom she had been sleeping in, or anywhere else for that matter. No recognizable human remains could be found. And based on the conditions of the fire, the medical examiner concluded that the infant had been completely consumed by it. That was the official story anyway, and Luz understandably refused to accept it. From the beginning, Luz believed something else happened that night, and that feeling never really went away. To make things worse, in reality, that feeling was absolutely correct. Delimar did not die in the fire that night in 1997. So let's fast forward back to January of 2003 and the birthday party Luz attended. As soon as she could after getting the sample of hair from the little girl at the party, Luz met with the police to plead her case. She knew she sounded crazy, but it all made too much sense to her that Delimar was alive somewhere and now she had a way to potentially prove it. Those hairs, however, would never be tested. In order for DNA to be extracted from hair, the strands would need to come from the roots or a follicle, and the sample Luz gave them didn't have either. While police were willing to indulge Luz's story and consider performing a DNA test, there was little they could do without a proper sample. After digging into Luz's claim some more, investigators believed there was some worth in settling the matter once and for all. Unfortunately, though, it wouldn't be until February of the following year when police showed up on the front step of the little girl from the party and her mother to secure a saliva sample from each of them. When the results came back a few days later, hardly anyone involved in the case could believe it. The little girl from the party was without a doubt the biological daughter of Luz and Pedro, and the little girl's so-called mother was none other than Carolyn. This meant that Delimar wasn't dead. She had been taken. The how and why of Delimar's kidnapping have never been conclusively answered. But at some point during Carolyn's visit to the family on December 15th, she took Delimar and set the fire to the second floor of the row house's cover. Then in the days and weeks after the fire, Carolyn abruptly cut off contact with Luz and Pedro. Around the same time, she began telling people a different story. She claimed that she had given birth to a baby girl at home on December 12th, just 3 days before the fire. She later obtained a New Jersey birth certificate, listing that date as the birthday of a child named Aaliyah Hernandez. On the night of December 15th, after the fire had already occurred, Carolyn called her boyfriend and told him that she had delivered the couple's baby just a few days earlier. As you might imagine, the timing of it all raised a lot of questions among the people who knew her. Some family members were aware that Carolyn had previously undergone a tubal ligation which prevents pregnancy at a rate of about 99%. Others noted that she had not appeared pregnant in the months leading up to December. Despite those doubts though, no one ever really challenged her story. Carolyn's claim went largely unquestioned and life simply moved on. After the kidnapping, Carolyn took Delimar to Willingboro, New Jersey, just 6 miles outside of Philadelphia. There, Delimar was raised under the name Aaliyah, believing that Carolyn was her biological mother. For the first 6 years of her life, Delimar had no reason to think otherwise. Carolyn raised Delimar as a single mother alongside 3 much older children Delimar came to know as her siblings. Frustratingly, as she worked long hours at a pharmacy, Carolyn was supposedly an absent mother and wasn't the warmest or most caring person to her children. Discipline in Carolyn's house was also supposedly harsh, and when Delimar would act up, Carolyn would fetch a belt and use it so hard that she would leave welts and marks on her skin. As Delimar grew older, Carolyn began telling her about a bad woman who wanted to take her away. Carolyn warned that this woman could not be trusted and that she needed to do whatever she could to stay away from her. Delimar didn't know it at the time, but the person being described by Carolyn was her biological mother, Luz. Despite the instability at home, Delimar went to school, made friends, attended playdates and parties, and took part in activities that would indicate a normal upbringing. Carolyn even got her involved in some child modeling work. And all of this was going on while Delimar had another family just miles away without her knowledge. She was taken well before she was able to form memories, and she lived a childhood shaped by Carolyn's version of events. She believed Carolyn was her biological mother and accepted the warning she was given about the unnamed woman who might try to take her away. The moment Luz finally spotted Delimar at the party, Carolyn's lies began to unravel. Although it would take some time before anyone other than Luz and the police would know this. During the investigation, after Luz brought the police the strands of the girl's hair, detectives contacted Carolyn in February of 2004 and asked for a photograph of the child known as Aaliyah Hernandez. This was likely the moment that Carolyn realized that the world she had built was being threatened. So when she provided police with a photo, the image was later determined to be that of another child, not Aaliyah. Then, later that month, investigators returned to Carolyn's house to collect the DNA. As they prepared to take a saliva sample from the little girl, Carolyn pulled her aside and sprayed something into her mouth and told her not to swallow it. It was later determined that Carolyn had sprayed her own saliva into Delimar's mouth in hopes of sabotaging the test results. This obviously was a desperate ploy that thankfully didn't work, and the results conclusively determined that Aaliyah Hernandez was actually Delimar Vera. With solid and indisputable proof, authorities moved quickly. The child was removed from Carolyn's care and returned to her biological family. For Delimar, as you might imagine, the change was sudden and jarring. The woman she believed was her mother was gone, and the people she'd been warned about by Carolyn were now telling her the truth about who she was. Carolyn was then arrested and charged with arson, kidnapping, and attempted murder. In court, Carolyn did not admit guilt, but she didn't fight the charges either. She entered a plea of no contest, meaning she accepted the punishment without formally acknowledging responsibility. So the case moved forward towards sentencing without a trial. In September of 2005, Carolyn was given between 9 and 30 years in prison. Just before the sentence was handed down, she addressed the court and told the judge that she truly believed that Delimar was her biological daughter. Once again, unfortunately, how Carolyn executed the kidnapping and why she did it have never been revealed, but several theories have been considered. One suggested that Carolyn wanted another child but couldn't, and she also had a history of falsely claiming she was pregnant, possibly because she liked the attention. Another raised the possibility that having a newborn might influence sentencing in unrelated legal trouble she was facing at the time. Then a third theory alleged that Pedro was in on the kidnapping with Carolyn, and that he never believed that Delimar was his biological daughter. However, Pedro denied any role in the crime and was never charged, nor has any evidence ever tied him to the kidnapping. The legal process brought an official end to the case, but it didn't undo the damage Carolyn had caused. Delimar had lost 6 years with her biological family, and Luz had spent 6 years being told that her daughter was dead. And unfortunately, reuniting with her biological family didn't bring instant stability for Delimar either. Pedro and Luz had broken up years earlier, so Delimar lived with her mother, who was strict and protective of her. She had already lost her daughter once and was determined not to let it happen again. By the time Delimar turned 12, she apparently often clashed with Luz, and eventually she moved in with her father, but that relationship also broke down. After a heated argument that turned physical, she entered foster care. For several years after that, Delimar largely raised herself, working odd jobs and moving between unstable living situations. By 19, she was in an abusive relationship and living in a dangerous neighborhood. But the following year, she decided to leave it all behind. She packed her belongings and moved into her own apartment, which was the spark she needed to turn her life around. Today, Delimar lives quietly in Philadelphia with her husband and stepson. Over the past decade, her relationships with both her parents have improved, and her story was turned into a movie in 2008. And in 2024, a documentary detailing her kidnapping and life afterward was released. A case that began with fire and ended with DNA, proving that sometimes a mother's intuition is the most powerful evidence of all.